Okay. Welcome to Mission Magic. I'm Lucy Macara, host of the Mission Magic Women's Group, founder of Book Magic AI and Rethink Press, and author of 14 books. In these Mission Magic sessions, I talk to mission-led women about their brilliant new ideas, concepts, and visions. And today I'm delighted to welcome Mary Gregory. Mary is an executive leadership coach, facilitator, and author of the brilliant Amazon #1 bestseller, Ego, Get Over Yourself and Lead. I think that's such a wonderful title and subtitle. She has led transformation for organizations including Tesco, Ralph Lauren, and First Choice Holidays. And she hosts the brilliant She Leads Collective podcast, which you must listen to if you haven't already. Mary helps women move beyond ego-driven patterns to lead with courage, compassion, and authenticity. And I, for one, can't wait to learn more about the female ego and how it affects our confidence and leadership. So, welcome, Mary. It is lovely to have you here.
Thank you
And
so much, Lucy.
thank you for joining us. And so, to start with, Mary, um, the female ego trap is a powerful phrase. So, what do you mean by it, and why does it matter?
Okay, well, it matters. It matters to all of us because we're all human beings and everyone has an ego. So maybe it's helpful to explain what I see an ego as being. So our ego is our defense system. And I say a whole system because there's a whole different ways of being and doing and things that we can take on that will be defensive, defend our sense of well-being and keeps our social anxiety at bay. I mean, in the old days, way back in the days of cavemen and women, we were literally fighting off real threats like saber-toothed tigers and things. But in our modern world, we are constantly filtering for things that will threaten our sense of okayness and cause us social anxiety. And therefore, our ego is a fantastic defense system that supports us to deal with that anxiety. We develop coping mechanisms, and we develop these when we're young children through decisions we've made, through the experiences we've had, and they become sort of thought patterns and ways of being that, on the one sense, support us, but on the other, as we become adults, don't necessarily support us anymore because our circumstances have changed and who we are has developed and grown from there. And so that's what I describe ego as. For the female ego trap, the reason I am interested and got interested in this is I do a lot of work with female leaders. And I mean, I work with male leaders as well, but over the years, what I've noticed are some distinct differences between how men's egos tend to show up and how women's egos tend to show up.
Oh,
And
that's
quite,
fascinating. Yeah. So,
yeah.
do tell us what it will. How do we show up differently as women?
Well, classically, the ego that you tend to hear more about, and one that gets bandied about in the press, and oh, they've got such a big ego, and I can think of a very famous politician of leader of this country actually, who is epitomizes what it looks like to have a really big ego, over in what I would call overinflated ego, where it takes over the room, it sucks the energy out of the room. It's all about me, me, me. It's all about having some sort of act that is demonstrating who they are, but it's not really who they are because it's all about their ego. It's a survival strategy. That is a very loud, overinflated ego, and men tend to develop those egos. It doesn't mean that women don't have them, because I can think of myself at this times, I can be very overinflated. Um, but it's just a tendency. These are trends we're talking about. And for women, certainly the women I work with in the space of leading in the corporate world or building and developing their own businesses, the things that tend to hold them back is a much quieter type of ego. It's that little voice in your head that's saying, you mustn't speak up in this meeting. People will laugh at you if you do. You've got nothing really to offer here. That voice that is negative, that is telling you to just play it small. That is also your ego. Anything that's associated with fear or anxiety, a reaction to that fear or anxiety is our ego. And I refer to that part of our ego as our underinflated ego. And my experience is that women tend to move towards the underinflated ego, where they hold themselves back, they play smaller, not necessarily because they might want to, but the system around them, the way they've been brought up, they might have been taught certain ways of being, that their survival strategy is to I'll just be, I'll be nice to people, I won't challenge, I'll just keep myself quiet and smaller than I need to be.
That's fascinating. So, I mean, ego is kind of perhaps, partly at least, a series of ingrained habits that we don't even notice.
Yes,
Um,
that's another way of describing it. I mean, because really it's decisions we've made years ago based on our experiences that develop these strategies, which you could describe as ingrained habits. And I think the thing when you say we don't even notice, we are frequently not aware of them. And one of the strategies to actually help you get over your ego is to start building that awareness and noticing what are the things that really trigger you and hook your ego into being present.
so, Mary, you've coached women leaders for many years. Was there a moment or a pattern that you saw that first made you realize that this was a universal issue and not just kind of various flaws in individuals?
Yeah, so I think it's come not just from coaching and working with people, it's come from my own development as well. We've and realizing that we've all got an ego. That's the paradox of it, is we can't necessarily live without it. But there are times it's not really that great to live with it because it might not be doing us any favors. So I think from my own development and recognizing my own ego traps and my own ego patterns, that certainly has helped me become more aware. But also noticing in my clients, for themselves, when they might hold themselves back. And this trend of the sort of quieter, underinflated ego is definitely one that comes through more for women that I've worked with than for men.
That's interesting. I mean, and is that the one behavior that women can notice in themselves that might signal they're in an ego trap, or are there any other sort of particular um, realizations we might have, activities we engage in, behaviors?
So I would say the thing, how you can notice and this accounts for overinflated and underinflated, the things that will tell us when we're caught in an ego reaction is when we get, because usually we get triggered in some shape or form, is when the reaction is greater than the situation might demand. So, something small happens and you have a huge reaction to it. Um, Somebody might look at you and you think, oh, immediately I've done something wrong or whatever it is. And that is absolutely an ego reaction. It's based on fear. So anything that's based on fear or anxiety is an ego reaction. The only time we're out of ego is when we're fully present and in the moment and not given by those anxieties, because our anxieties stem from things that might have happened to us in the past. So we might be reminded of something. So, that look that somebody gave you, maybe a teacher gave you a stern look at school and then told you off or whatever. And that therefore causes an anxiety when someone else might look at you and you read it as the same sort of look. That's a past-based reaction. Or we're worried about the future. We're anxious about what am I going to do if, and maybe if I go into this presentation, they're all going to laugh at me, or I'm going to, turn up and not have the answers to all the questions. When we're thinking about the future, that also activates our ego. So the way to get out of it is to get ourselves into the present. And a
That's
great
interesting.
strategy for doing that, I'm just, well, because it just
Yes,
seems to come
please
through,
give us
is
that.
actually if you find yourself in that reaction in the moment, to just get yourself grounded and present. And the first step you can do to that is to take a breath, something that I call the change breath. So just breathe in and then gently breathe out. And as you breathe out, just let it go. And that will calm the whole of your limbic system. Because when we're in reaction, it affects the neuroscience element of it. So that affects our nervous system. We go into that reaction mode. So by breathing calmly, that immediately brings our reaction down and getting yourself into a centered kind of feet on the floor, back against the chair if you're sitting down, more neutral position. Immediately that will help calm your ego reaction and get you present.
That's really helpful. Michaela has asked in the chat, is ego influenced by our environment too? And I just want to say, if you have got questions, do put them in the chat at the moment. I will kind of pass them on to Mary, and we will have Q&A at the end. So,
Yes.
so Mary, what about
Well,
environment?
absolutely, our environment. I mean, I talk in my book about triggers, and you can be driving along the M25 and maybe you're driving over the speed limit, dare I say, and you get that blue flash in the mirror. That's your environment. Immediately, what do you think? That's that blue flash. I'm over the speed limit. You put your foot on the brake. I mean, that's probably a helpful survival strategy that our ego offers us, which is why it's not about let's get rid of our ego. It's like how can we work with who we are and our egos? And you'll reduce your speed so that the police won't give you a fine. So that's an example of how environment absolutely influences the way we act and behave and the way we respond.
So, what are some of the most common ego traps that you see in successful women?
Okay, so I think probably, I mean, just thinking about the programs I run, that the ones that come through most commonly, I think the biggest one is speaking up in meetings and getting their voice in the room. And I have to be fair that it's not just about the women. It's about this is actually, Michaela's question is very pertinent because it is about the environment they're in and about the way we are socialized and it's normal behavior as to how we do this and the whole thing about mansplaining. So women being in the meeting and finding it very hard to get their voice in the room because the men would tend to be dominating in terms of those meetings. And in organisations that are being more mindful about equity and making sure there's a more even playing field, the men are tuned in to be more sensitive to allowing women to step in and speak. But that is probably the most common one that I come across is that women saying, I find it very hard to get my voice in the room. And then second to that, which is a similar thing, it's similar circumstances, putting forward your idea, actually having the courage to speak up, share their idea, and it get ignored and not acknowledged. And then somebody, usually a man, comes in and gives the same idea, and suddenly the credit is given to the man who has actually just shared the idea that you've just put forward. That those are two very common circumstances, and really, if you think about it, it's no wonder that women get discouraged when those things actually do happen in real time. And my take on that is, if that happens to you as a woman in a meeting, somebody actually takes the idea that you've just suggested, you make light of it. Don't get heavy about it. Just make light of it. Oh, I so love that you like my idea and you've taken it on board. You use humor in that situation because the man who's taken the idea probably doesn't even realize that's what's happened because this is the power of unconscious bias. It's going on dynamically in all sorts of different shapes and sizes, and it is unconscious. People might say, "Oh no, they definitely knew." We don't know that they knew. It's likely that it was unconscious. So make light of it, but draw attention to it
I was
because
going to
it's
say, is
important to
that
build
the
awareness.
yes, is it important to draw attention to it rather than just sitting there and sort of going internally, God, here we
Yes.
go again.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. So, I know that I've heard you talk about perfectionism and over
yes.
responsibility. So, are those kind of aspects of female ego kind of in disguise almost?
I think those are two very common ones also. So perfectionism is all born out of this desire to control really and make sure everything turns up and it's the best possible it can be. So it's again very well intentioned. And if we didn't have perfectionists in the world, we wouldn't have high standards, we wouldn't have safety standards met. We need to have that element around. But there's also something knowing about what is good enough and making sure that we're able to relax that. Again, this is the way to get over the ego drive of perfectionism, being able to think, well, what is good enough? Have I met good enough standards in this situation rather than constantly looking for where the hole is and driving yourself and potentially your team as well, because if you're a leader and you're leading a team and you're perfectionist, it can be very draining for the team. They often feel micromanaged, they often feel disillusioned because nothing's ever going to be good enough. So you've really got to work, be mindful and conscious. That's why self-awareness is so important of how your perfectionism might be impacting other people.
Yeah, interesting.
And
I'd be very interested to know if anyone on the call has had a sort of light bulb moment through what you've been saying, and if you have, do put in the chat what you've recognised, whether there's some particular circumstance or behaviour that you do that you suddenly realise is ego.
yes,
But Mary, many women are seen as confident from the outside. They don't
yeah,
appear to suffer from this kind of shrinking violet kind of
yeah.
behavior. But do they feel self-doubt internally? Where's the ego sitting in that?
So, I also, part of the work I do is around confidence and the confidence myths that there are. And I think when we look at other people and think, oh, they're so confident, if only I had the confidence that they had, I can absolutely guarantee that those people will not always be confident because confidence is not a fixed state. It ebbs and flows depending on your circumstances, depending on what you're taking on in your life. I mean, I can think if I suddenly design a new workshop or if I take on a new activity, I'm going to feel less confident than if I'm really practiced and know and an expert in that area. So similarly, women and I coach a lot of very senior women leaders. They have drops in confidence. It's perfectly normal. I mean, particularly in this world of change that is absolutely constant and is faster and faster and faster. People are frequently out of their comfort zone and not necessarily knowing what they're doing or what's going to happen next. And it's absolutely eats away at people's confidence. So just because you've made it to CEO position doesn't mean to say you're going to have a drop in confidence sometimes. So it's about recognizing that and knowing what you need to do to make yourself feel okay. And that's the whole thing. Ego is always filtering for, is this going to threaten my sense of okayness?
Right.
And what's important is not to fall into the traps of, well, what I learned as a child was that if I'm just really nice to people, I'll be okay. Because the whole thing is, and that's the people pleasing ego trap, the whole thing is that that doesn't work for you as an adult because you need to set boundaries. You can't please everybody. So it's about what do I need to do in this moment in time to help me rebuild my confidence around whatever the situation is that I'm dealing with.
So presumably men have these moments of lack of confidence too. How do they react differently to those, those sort of sudden hits of worry and anxiety?
So
Um,
I would agree that men do. And I've coached men who've had drops in confidence. I think a couple of the biggest differences between men and women, particularly in the business forum, is that men have a much, it's the networks and the workplace is set up to support men much better than it is to support women. So they've got that much more in place to help them recover themselves much more quickly. But also in terms of habits and patterns and how we behave, women tend to ruminate an awful lot more than men do. So if something hasn't gone well, we will tend to go into over analysis and, oh, why didn't I do it that way? And whereas, research tells us that men just go, oh, that didn't work. Right, let's go on to the next thing and see what I can learn from that. And they'll move on much more quickly. It doesn't mean there are no men who never ruminate. Of course they do. But, on the whole, what we notice is that women tend to get caught up with beating themselves up more, I would say.
that's so interesting. I really recognize that. I mean, I've only got to say one thing that doesn't appear to land well in a meeting, say, or that I kind of look back and think, oh God, I wish I hadn't said that. And I
Yeah,
think about it, I replay it over and over again in my head. And that's all ego, is it? I guess it is.
yes. It is. It's all part and parcel of the same thing. We talk about imposter syndrome. That's also these anything that is about thought patterns. Imposter syndrome is basically a thought pattern telling us that we're just not good enough, we're not worthy. But it's a survival strategy for, well, it'll keep me safe. It'll stop me stepping out my comfort zone. And therefore it hinders your growth, it hinders your development, hinders your ability to take risks.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That makes perfect sense. So, I mean, how do you think these patterns affect women's visibility, voice, and influence as we go into, as men go into sort of kind of kind of outplaying ego, if you like, we kind of, internalize and go quiet. How can we kind of it sounds like it feels like there are two very different kinds of behavior that are playing against each other and doesn't help us. How can we break that kind of dichotomy?
So, I mean, that's a great question. I love that because, again, a lot of the women I work with really resist what I call self-advocation. So they won't promote themselves. They think talking about their successes is bragging, and bragging is got a negative connotation and seen as arrogant and all that sort of stuff. There's something about having to reframe how we look at this. And I've got my own story actually, which
Oh, tell us.
because I've a lot of these things I've been there, I've done it. So I can remember, way back, finding it very difficult to talk about what I've achieved and what my successes are and share and everything. And someone once gave me some feedback which really stung. And they said, Mary, I think you're being really stingy. And I was like, oh,
Oh,
me being stingy? I try to be nice to people and be supportive and generous. And so when they said that they thought I was being stingy, that really rocked home for me. And when I sort of went away and reflected on it, it really helped me reframe how to look at sharing your successes, sharing your stories. Because actually, if you share something that you've learned or you've shared something that you've succeeded in and the achievement you've made, you are sharing something that could help somebody else. If you don't share your stories, other people won't know what those experiences could be like and what might be possible for them. And this is great both in the world generally, but also in the business context, particularly in the large organizations that many of us work in. Person in one department over here, if you share your story, you could help somebody in another part of the organization that would never have thought of the thing that you've achieved. So it is an act of generosity to self-advocate. And that again is shifting your ego focus away from that fearfulness and they'll think I'm arrogant, they'll think I'm big-headed, to engaging with just, I'm going to contribute and I'm going to make a difference through my contributions, which is
that's
more of an ego-free approach.
that's really interesting. So actually, we need to make ourselves more vulnerable. And that
Yeah.
kind of affects the way we, that sort of almost breaks down the ego barrier if we
Yes, it
allow
does.
ourselves.
And I like, yeah, because actually making yourself more vulnerable, because part of ego is about covering up, looking good. I don't look stupid. I don't look bad. So I'm going to cover all that up by pretending to be, in charge and sorted out when really I'm not. So actually that vulnerability, it does take some getting over your ego to be vulnerable, but it can make such a difference, particularly in leadership, because it connects you to other people. People suddenly realize you're a human being, you're not a machine, and the world is full of human beings, not machines.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. In the comments, I am very bad at the people pleasing, approval seeking stuff. That very much comes from my family upbringing. I think this could be more typical in the Generation X. Do the generational differences in the way female ego displays, do you think?
There are bound to be generational differences because each generation has its own kind of footprint, as it were. But I would say to that person, if they're Generation X, I'm a baby boomer, and my biggest challenge through my life has been people pleasing and having to learn to actually, I'm going to say no to this. I'm going to look after myself first. That, is an ongoing, I might say it's an ongoing journey. I call myself a recovering people pleaser, actually, because it's a bit like having an addiction in a way. But yeah, yeah, I think and the fact that person is acknowledging they're a people pleaser, the fact you're aware of it, you're giving yourself a chance to do something about it. So it's looking at where can you look after yourself? What might be a simple first step you could take to just break that pattern for yourself?
Yeah, yeah, and it is a difficult one because ignoring the generational things, I'd like to think that much younger women are not playing into this people pleasing thing so much. I don't know if it's true, but I'd like to think there's a change there. But for us women of maybe 40 and beyond, what is that first simple step that you can do? Is it kind of
Well,
recognizing that you're
the
doing it and then,
noticing, the noticing is a really important step. So something you could take, and this isn't just about people pleasing, this is about your triggers, because people pleasing is one of your ego traps. You'll fall into it when your ego is activated. So what you could do is keep what I call a trigger diary. And you don't have to do it all. It's not like suddenly the rest of your life you're keeping a trigger diary. You could just choose a day in the week or and just notice when were you triggered. As you know, keep checking in maybe at coffee time, at lunchtime. Have you been triggered today so far? And then exploring what was behind that trigger. What was really going on that caused you to react in that way? Because when we're triggered, that's our ego being activated and we're reacting from that unconscious place of defending and soothing our anxiety. So with the people pleasing, it's like somebody comes in and they make a demand of you, and you immediately, oh yes, yes. Maybe because there's a status, maybe it's somebody who's your boss or somebody very senior in your organization, and there's a status thing that has triggered you in that situation. But the learning about what triggers you and where your ego gets caught up is a great first step.
uh,
And then in the moment, the biggest thing you can do is the breath, which I've already mentioned, taking that breath and managing yourself. There are also things you can do in your life as well, generally. So I feel like I'm talking about in the moment, but the stronger we create our personal foundation, the easier it is to manage ourselves emotionally. So, what I mean by that is making sure we get enough sleep, we look after ourselves in a holistic way. So, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, we feel a connection with the bigger picture or whatever it is that works for you. But holistically taking care of ourselves gives us that strength to then manage ourselves much better in the moment as well. Because I don't know about you, but if I haven't had enough sleep, I mean, I'm jet lagged this week. So when I'm not on full throttle energy wise, it absolutely means I'll be more inclined to be activated and my ego comes into play.
right, right. And do we know that we've got it wrong by our own internal feelings? So, I mean, if somebody asks you to do something, and you're happy to do it and you say yes, that's kind of okay and not ego. But if you say yes and it's like, oh, I wish I hadn't said that kind of, or, why did they ask me to do that? Is it that kind of feeling of dissonance that tells us it's ego at play?
Yeah, I think that's I love that you've brought that up, Lucy, because what you're talking about is self-regulation, noticing how you're feeling. So if you say yes and you feel a certain joy, that is definitely you aligning with yourself and engaging with others and with the world rather than letting your ego drive you. If you're saying yes and there's an underlying resentment going on there, that would definitely be an indication of ego as well. The other indications, and while we're on the subject, is if you're being right about something, like I am definitely right here and you are wrong, that is definitely ego at play as well, when we're being very self-righteous about things. So,
That's a really interesting one. I mean, apart from the breath, which is obviously, important, what is something that you can do in the moment to kind of give yourself time to appreciate? Somebody makes a huge demand on you. Is there something you can say that kind of doesn't require you to go, oh, yes, of course I'll do it?
yeah.
That you can kind of push it away a little bit or give yourself time.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, so I mean, we're focusing on the people pleasing element here, but it's whenever you get activated, you can you can always ask for time. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd love to help you. I am a bit piled up with things at the moment. I'd like to go and look at that before I say yes or no to it. You can absolutely delay it, or you can say no. You can just say no. And there are ways of saying no in a way that is reasonable, like, thank you for asking me. I'd love to have helped, but actually, I've got other commitments going on at the moment, which means I'm not able to support you with this. So
Right.
there are very easy ways of being able to say no. And that's, again, if your ego's driving you, you might find that more difficult to say. So it's almost like practice it for yourself so that when next time it happens, you've kind of got the words that can trip off the tongue for you.
Yeah, yeah. So it's forming better habits than the
Yeah,
old habits.
yes.
Mary, you also talk about quieting the defensive ego. What does that look like in practice?
Well, I think our ego is a defense mechanism, all of it. So, all of our ego is defensive. I think the strategies I've been talking about already um, tie in with that really. Um, I talked about lifestyle. I'll say a bit more about lifestyle. I do believe having some sort of practice, either, mindfulness practice or meditation or walks in nature, whatever it is that calms your limbic system. Because looking at this from a holistic perspective, when we are triggered and our ego is activated, it is sending all sorts of chemicals around our body which aren't necessarily healthy for us, and therefore making sure we have time in a regular routine of calm. So, for example, one thing I do is I go out into my garden. I've only got a small garden, but part of my morning routine is to go out into my garden, even if it's freezing cold. I might not stay very long out there if it's very cold or if it's raining, just to look at what's happening in the garden at the moment. I mean, at the moment that's, it's all dying off and everything. But the fact is, I can notice that and I look at that and I connect with nature and I hear the bird song. It's a calming activity. So it's finding healthy calming activities, because other people might find things like, I'll smoke 20 cigarettes, that'll be calming. That's not necessarily healthy. So it's the things that will help you holistically to calm your limbic system, will help you with your ego.
That's really interesting. Yes, I find dog walking, although I kind of, sometimes think, oh God, I haven't got time for this. I have to go and walk the dogs. When I've done it and I come back, I
Yeah.
know that, it's given me time to process, space to calm, and it's kind of making sure that you just do that out of habit in a sense. I mean, obviously with dogs you do have to do it, but but
Well, it's a
but
really positive habit because it calms you down. And when
yeah,
we're in this calmer, more centered space, it's much easier to self-regulate and to manage ourselves.
yeah, yeah. So going back to the environment where this is going to happen, how can we as women strengthen our inner authority and speak with kind of more grounded confidence? How can we do that so we feel better, but also we come across better?
Yes. So I think practicing all the things we've started talking about already will help, but also being mindful of the language that you're using as well. Women are famous for saying, we did this rather than I did it. So really practicing owning the things that you have actually achieved. And absolutely, I know some of the women in my group say, "Oh, but it was the team that achieved it." It's go, yeah, but own your part in that. If you led the team, I led the team to achieve what the team has achieved, or my part was making sure that we kept our stakeholders happy. You talk about that element of it, but you own the elements that there are, and you use the sort of the I word to really help you in that, because women are very um, uh, self-deprecating in that respect. The other thing that I think is interesting is men will all often, so women might say, I can't do it, and men will say it can't be done. So it's being more mindful. What a different picture that paints immediately, doesn't it? That simple phrase just reworded. So it's being women learning to be more mindful, and that's the overall responsibility. Not everything is your responsibility. Sometimes it can't be done. It's not about whether you're able to do it or not. It just can't be done. And you can also not be responsible for the way people react. Their reactions are their reactions. It's not your fault if they react in the way that they react. You've done what you've done. If you've come from good intention and positive intention, that is enough. That's what you can be responsible for. How somebody reacts is their reaction. It's not your fault if they react in a way you hadn't expected, or it's negative or whatever.
That's very helpful. So, where does self-trust fit into this conversation?
Well, I think it fits in hugely. And it's something that you do have to keep learning and growing in yourself. And I think that's why, if you're a leader, whatever role you're in, there's a responsibility to keep developing and working on yourself and learning that you are someone who is trusting, that you can trust yourself. And a great way to do that is to look at what you've achieved, look at past achievements, look at past risks that you've taken or decisions that you've made and when they worked out, reminding yourself that you're a capable person and things you've dealt with some challenging things and they've worked out. That's a great reminder of the self-trust. But absolutely, it's really important that you do trust yourself and you keep developing that sense of okayness in yourself. All
That's
the
really
things we've talked about today, actually, Lucy, help develop that okayness in ourselves.
yeah. No, that's really. I mean, I literally had an experience this morning where I'm in a WhatsApp group on with all men basically, and I put something in it this morning, a suggestion, and I thought, oh God, that's silly. I think I'm going to delete that. And just before I deleted it, two people came in and said, "What a good idea." And I thought, oh, I should have trusted myself. It was a good idea,
Yes,
actually.
yes, yes, brilliant. That's a great example.
But you have to, yeah, you just have to keep remembering those instances, don't you?
You
And kind
do,
of,
and it takes courage. So,
yeah,
what I hear in terms of what you did was you were courageous, and it does take courage. And courage is not the lack of fear. Courage is acting despite the fear. It's taking the fear with you, and then seeing what happens. I have a view of life that life is just one long experiment. So, who knows what's going to happen? Give it a go and see what happens.
yeah. I mean, after all, the things that you replay in your head as that awful moment when you did or said something, nobody else probably noticed it. I
No?
mean, yeah, you kind of have to recognize that at some point.
Yes,
So,
yes.
Mary, what difference do you think it would make, I mean, organizationally and culturally, if more women recognized these patterns and shifted them? Could we, have a big effect on corporate business and culture generally?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think part of the work I do is helping women to recognize and shift these patterns. And I would say overall, what those organizations that I've worked with, women are stepping up much more and applying for roles that maybe were out of their comfort zone previously. And it's increasing women's presence within the organization and within the business. And the more that happens, the better, really, because if you want to be a high performing organization, which is really organizations are obsessed with performance, that's what it's all about, isn't it? At the end of the day, they want to get the performance. But if you really want to perform at your peak, you've got to entertain and encourage women to step up, which is why the work like this is so, so important, I think, because there's tons of data that tells us that those organizations that have a greater gender balance actually are much more successful.
Yeah, yes. So if anybody here or listening to this were to do just one thing differently after today, what would you suggest that is?
Oh gosh, God, there's so many things they could
I
do.
know,
So
yeah.
I've got to just think of one. I think, firstly, commit to start building your self-awareness and practicing self-compassion. So that's two things I realize.
You
I've
can
got,
have
probably got a
more.
list. I've probably got a
Yes,
list.
have a list, yeah.
Commit to building your self-awareness, practice self-compassion because we don't get it right 100%. I've been doing this work for years and you can ask my partner, my ego's off on its doing its stuff all the time, because we are an ego 80% of the time. So that's one thing. So practice self-compassion, but also in terms of relating to others, try to seek first to understand them. It's that good old Stephen Covey, one of his habits, seek first to understand where they're coming from in order to then be understood yourself. That kind of gets rid of the whole thing about assumptions. A lot of the breakdowns in communication and things that don't work is because we're running on assumptions. So trying to get really clear and explicit with people. And again, that is another way of, I talk in my book about adult to adult communication, which is ego-free communication. And one way to do that is what I call contracting. This is much more than one tip, sorry. But it's like,
That's
in the
fine.
coaching world, we use it a lot. You contract with your clients to create a safe environment. You get clear about what you expect of each other. But actually, in your working relationships and in your personal relationships, be clear with people about what you need and expect from each other. And that will open up space for much more fruitful and adult type communication, rather than letting the egos getting to power plays or whatever it is they go into, because there's all sorts of games and dynamics that egos can go into too.
Yes, that's a whole big kind of
That's
subject in
another
itself, isn't it?
conversation.
Yes, yes. So Faranak says, spot on, Mary. And Christelle says, life is a long experiment, so powerful the ego strikes. So yes, it's brilliant. So Mary, this has been so enlightening and insightful. How can women or men continue to engage with you and your work going forward? What would you
Oh,
like to
yes, well, they can buy my
suggest?
book, which is on Amazon. So that's, if they want to learn more about ego and get into it and explore some of the traps and ways of being around it, they can buy my book, which is on Amazon. Or I'm really happy for people to reach out to me. I love helping people with their problems, their challenges, particularly if there's tricky dynamics and things going on. Reach out to me for a discovery call via LinkedIn. I'm very happy to send you my Calendly invite and we can have a chat about what are the things that might be challenging you. And then I've got various offers in terms of coaching. I've got a leadership power hour, which is another offer. So depending on what comes through in that discovery call, we can look at what might be the best way to move forward. And also that discovery call, there is no obligation either. So that if that is enough, if that's all they need, that is fine as well.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Mary. People are saying in the chat how interesting this has been and how much
Oh, that's lovely.
they.
I'd also, one more thing I forgot, I nearly forgot.
Oh,
I'm also my She Leads Collective podcast. It's just completed its first season and is due to launch again on the 21st of January. But do join my She Leads Collective LinkedIn group as well,
yes,
which
absolutely.
is
No,
all
the
about,
podcast is great. I can
yeah.
highly recommend the interviews you do. They're fantastic discussions with very interesting women. So, yes, thank you. So, Mary, I don't know if anybody's got any questions or comments they'd like to make live. There's lots of thanks in the chat and inspirational and other nice adjectives. Has anybody got anything they'd like to share? Or, yes, Paula, you've got your hand up.
Hello, Mary. I was making copious notes. I am familiar with your work, as you know, but I thought you explained things really beautifully and really succinctly. So these are kind of more comments and observations than questions as such. But you know that like the loose is what points would you say? I've really got from that like real super clear communication
Mm,
is so because then we're clear for ourselves and sorry about my dog, she's waiting to be walked, for yourself and for others.
yes.
Um and and i and so how I felt about that with you regard to you saying about what we say and how we engage, am I right in thinking you were essentially saying about we're basically upgrading the words that we say to ourselves?
Oh, that's a great way of putting it, actually, Paula. Thank you.
Is that
Yeah, upgrade your internal voice.
Yeah, so then when we're doing that, so basically what I'm taking from what you're saying and how I sort of been seeing the world through my lens is that the ego isn't fixed, and by doing these things that from what you said at the very start, if I just refer back to my notes, the ego is a defense system.
Hmm.
And so if we know we don't have to defend ourselves, then it's just making sure we're safe. So
Yes.
once we know we're safe, then we don't have to be in a defensive mode. So
Yeah.
by changing our words and changing our clarity, would you say that? Have I
I
understood?
would say that, but I think that the thing about ego is where our ego was formed when we were much younger. So it worked for us then. It doesn't necessarily work for us now. So we might, we talk about having fixed thinking around certain things when we're having a reaction to something. And it's like, well, that might have worked when I was a child, not talking to strangers or whatever, but now I need to talk to strangers because it's part of my business. It's like
Yeah, so there's a
it's that's where
contradiction.
the upgrade comes, which is why I
Yeah,
like that term.
but that's what how I'm seeing it, Mary, is the work that you're doing gives people the upgrade.
Yes.
And then the first thing you said was the breath. So you take the breath and it gives you time to then bring in your new system
Yes.
rather than the childhood system.
Yes.
And that means that you're flowing into a beautiful space rather than in the fight or flight.
Yes. Rather
Is
than
that?
survival mode, you're
Yeah, yeah,
going
yeah,
towards
yeah.
thriving. Yes.
So is that, am I interpreting?
You are. That's a great interpretation,
Fabulous,
Paula.
fabulous.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed this, and I do. I must say to Lucy as well. I really enjoy this question and answer session. I find it really, really helpful. So I've found it really enlightening. Thank you so much. And with jet lag, you've done fabulously well. Well done.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Incredible. Yes. Anybody else got any comments, anything they'd like to share, or a question for Mary?
Are
I
there any
think
in the chat?
there's nothing in the chat that we haven't touched on, I don't think. If anybody does want to say anything, now's your chance.
I'm going to
But
be brave.
oh, Michaela, go
I'm going
ahead.
to be brave and
Be
speak
brave.
up.
Don't be a people pleaser.
Yeah, that's it. I'm thinking about the differences between men and women in terms of ego, and obviously we have our cycle, our female cycle. So are there times when we ought to be possibly sort of retreating a bit more, or should we be paying attention to that side of ourselves, in that maybe there are times when we could give ourselves a bit of a break and say, actually, no, I'm not in that sort of stage in my
Yeah.
cycle where I really want to be putting
Yes.
myself forward. I'm not explaining
So,
myself very well, but are you on?
my response to that, Michaela, is please attend to your needs wherever you are in your cycle, or whether you recognize you have a cycle or whatever. Just attend to your needs. There will be time. So, for example, this week I'm having an easier week because I know I'm not on full throttle, as it were. So it's do what you need, because the more we fulfill our needs and make sure we're okay, the more resourced we're going to be, and therefore the better equipped we are to self-regulate and to manage ourselves and our ego in the moment, or the egos of other people coming towards us, or whatever. So yes, do whatever you need. Attend to your needs.
Really good question. Paula, I think you put your hand up again.
Yes, may I speak into this piece with you, Mary, just briefly about what Michaela raised? Yeah, would that be
Yeah,
okay?
yeah,
Because I just want it, because my former iteration, many years I was a sculptor, and I was working with a business coach, and by speaking with her, like people speak with you, and then you show the clarity, and it's like, oh, it's obvious once you are told it, yeah. And she said, because I said on the run up to my period, I wouldn't be able to, my coordination went. So in my month time of work, that week wasn't a good time to do my assembly work.
yeah,
So I feel that this, for me as a sculptor, I'm making tangible things. But for women in meetings where it's like conversations and words can be intangible, in that seeing it in front
yes,
of you. And I just wanted to raise this for the ladies that are working in intangibles, which is what emotions and beliefs and things are. She literally said, schedule around these things. But then you're saying about stuff that can be quite challenging. And I just think it's important, as we're evolving into our better selves, for us to be aware that what you're saying can be things that are quite ephemeral. And
mm,
then that it can be quite challenging. So it's like baby steps, but also the awareness of the of our cycles
yes,
in that way, and so that, like Michaela's saying, there's a certain more gentleness about it.
yes,
If you don't want
yes,
to, if you've
absolutely.
been
And
attacked or something,
yes.
you're not going to want that, where you could just break down and tell people they're all a bunch of whatsits. And
Well, there are times, I know for me, I mean, my cycle is very different now than it used to be, but thinking about when I was working in the corporate world, my cycles, there'll be times I'd be more inclined towards maybe shed a tear or whatever, because I'm feeling more vulnerable at that point in my cycle. Now,
yeah.
your example that you've given, that you can schedule when you do your sculpting, not everyone can schedule when they need to be making a presentation or going to a
Oh, no,
meeting,
no, for
or
sure.
yeah, so it's like that's why attending to whatever you need, So, you know, if you know it's that vulnerable time of your cycle and you're going to be making a big presentation, just making sure you have a really good night's sleep the night
Sure,
before might be what
absolutely.
helps you enough, you
100.
know?
I wasn't suggesting people can't do things for a week. All I was meaning
Yeah.
is some of the more braver things are for the 3 weeks where they're feeling brave.
Yes.
That's kind of what I was. You
And
can still got the
yeah,
same roles every day, possibly. But
yeah.
can I just speak very quickly, and I'll jump off the mic. But also a friend of mine, when I had this conversation, Annie, and she was a ceramicist, and she said that she can get this kind of fieriness about her at a certain point through the month. And she said that's, I mean, this is going back in the day when you used to speak to your bank manager. And she'd say, that would be when I'd speak to my bank manager. Because then she had a bit more. So
Bit fire in her belly.
we can ride these waves. So sorry, I just
Yeah.
wanted to jump in on those points. So
No, no, that's great. That's great. And I would say also that we're not going to get it 100% right all the time. So that's the whole perfectionist piece. That's just let go. There'll be days where you won't perform as well as you will on other days. Just reflect on it, learn from it, and then just keep moving through really with the greater insight. But you've raised some great points there, both Michaela and Paula. Thank you.
Fantastic. Mary, any last thing you want to say before we wrap up? I really think this has been a fabulous session. And I think everybody will have learned a lot from it and got some, some insights
Yes.
and some moments where you go, oh, that was what I was doing, was it? That was
Yes.
ego.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so
Oh,
thank
yes.
you.
No, I thoroughly enjoyed it. So please, I'll just reiterate, please do connect with me. And if you want a discovery call, really, I'd love chatting. You can probably tell from my conversation with you, Lucy, I love chatting to people and talking about these things. So really happy to have conversations with people.
Great. Thank you so much, Mary Gregory.
Thank you.